Hello and welcome to the show. On today's episode, we're back with my DOD 250 project where I cloned a DOD 250. And when I first plugged it in, I was a slight bit disappointed it didn't sound the way I wanted it to, but that's okay. Because I've got some components in today that I'm going to be using to switch things up, maybe rework it a bit and see if we can get it to sound the way I want it to. This time I've actually made a point to bring in my good cab and mic it up reasonably well, I think, so that we can actually hear the differences. And we're going to play with this thing. I got some different capacitors, and I have a couple different op amps to try today. So stay tuned and let's see what happens. Once again, if you're aware, I own a Marshall JCM800, and it's all about the overdrive with this guy. And for the longest time, my go-to overdrive has been this DOD Malmsteen pedal. Seems to demand a high price now. I got it for 50 bucks cash, brand new at a local shop. I guess that was a steal. It's been good to me. The only thing I don't like about it is the tone is just a touch too thin. I'd like to fatten it up a bit. And I have experimented by replacing one of the capacitors, the feedback capacitor, right here. It's a 0.047 in here. I replaced it with a 0.1. It might have made it a little bit too fat, but I digress. We're comparing that to this guy. So, to start off, some sound samples. I'm gonna show you what this guy sounds like, or as good as it can sound gutted. It's been gutted for 2 weeks now as I've slowly been studying it. So it might be a little bit noisier than it's supposed to be. Well, that's the Malmsteen pedal. Now, this pedal that I built, which is, pretty much 100% what this old schematic says. Let's see what it sounds like. It sounds considerably fatter. Too fat, in fact. A lot of bass, a lot of low end. Now, off the top of my head, describing the sounds of these two pedals, this guy, it sounds kind of smashy, It's like the overdrive's supposed to drive the front end of your tube amp. This is kind of smashing it. I compare its tone to like cookies and cream ice cream. It's thick, it's smooth, with soft crunch in it. Whereas the Malmsteen pedal, it's like a fresh bowl of Cheerios that you just poured the milk into and stirred up, Juicy and crunchy and satisfying, if like me you like Cheerios. I want this one to be more juicy and crunchy. Now, these two pedals have 4 differences. And I played a game to spot the differences. I gotta point them out to you now. Difference number 1. This capacitor here, the 20 PF, in the Malmsteen pedal is a 25 PF. Now this is part of the feedback circuit. And if you know how the feedback circuit works, is it uses a process, basically phase cancellation, to bring down the gain. The input here is going to be in phase with the output here. But then if we take this information and feed it back to the inverted input on the op amp, that information is going to be out of phase, and that's going to phase cancel. The more of this information we put into there, the more it brings down the gain. So what happens here is this potentiometer, as we ground it out, it grounds out this feedback circuit, allowing this guy to run full chooch. As we turn the potentiometer up, it doesn't ground out this circuit and allows full feedback to bring down the gain. Now, what we have here is a resistor and a capacitor working together. Now, this 1 meg resistor is going to resist the voltage potential in the feedback loop. Otherwise, if we just put full feedback in, it would pretty much just turn the thing off. However, this capacitor is subject to controversy because a capacitor isn't going to resist the voltage potential. It's going to allow full potential through. However, it filters frequencies. The lower this value is, as as in the smaller the PF, the higher the frequencies it's going to filter. So this is essentially letting high frequencies pass in the feedback circuit. It's going to cause the op amp to filter out the high frequencies. If we switch to a 25 PF like the Malmsteen pedal, it's going to filter out less high frequencies. The other major difference that these pedals have is right here, the input capacitor. The stock diagram here calls for a 0.01. The Malmsteen pedal uses a 0.001, which is, you know, a tenth. What does that mean? Well, in that position, it works as a high-pass filter. It filters out the low frequencies. Now, a 0.01 is going to let more low frequencies in than a 0.001. So this guy right here is going to be filtering out quite a bit of low frequency information. And sure enough, the sound of this pedal reminds me of blocking distortion in tube amp preamp design, where we often lower the value of this coupling capacitor to filter out the low end that makes it sound farty. So I believe that's probably the biggest effect on the tone. Most of the other things are the same, like the diodes and these guys, except in a modern pedal, that's an 047 because they don't make 0.5s anymore. I found a 0.05 for this guy, but it was a big R ceramic capacitor that actually measured at 0.046, so I might as well have just gotten the proper capacitor. The only other two differences, one which could be major, is the op amp. This guy uses an LM741. This one uses the more modern 4558. Now, I can't get a 4558 equivalent that I'm aware of that's going to drop into this because they have a different pinout. The 741 is a single op amp, the 4558 is a dual. However, I do have another reference because one of the other op amps it says to use is a TL081. And I went ahead and acquired one of those little dealies. And the thing is, the TL081 is pretty much a single op amp equivalent of the TL072. Some of you guys might call BS on that. They were once different, but it seems that, you know, due to manufacturing processes, they're probably the same thing today. So this is going to sound identical to an 072. The 072 being a dual will fit this pedal. I've tested it, it works. Then we put the 081 in there, and then we can see how similar these guys actually sound. But that said, I do have another alternative op amp for it. We have a UA741CP, a UA741. It's like a knockoff of the 741, even though originally it would have been made by a different manufacturer. This one's also made by Texas Instruments. So let's start off real quick trying these different op amps and see how they sound. Now, I designed this pedal deliberately so that I can easily swap out the op amp. It's just right there. I don't need to do any trickery to get at it. If only the tool I had actually did a better job at it. Now let's start off by putting in the other 741. Theoretically, it should sound exactly identical, right? It doesn't. We've replaced the cookies with the ice cream with Rice Krispies. It's got more, it's crunchier. A little bit, I think it's got more gain. We're on to something, just as I expected. Different op amps, different sounds, even though they have similar part numbers. Hey, all new worlds of tone. This is why I'm getting fascinated by these pedals now, especially this basic little pedal. It's like, hey, just like changing the tubes in your amp, you mean I can change op amps to get different sounds? Oh, I'm in, bud. Now let's try the TL081. Now, if that's anything like the 7-1, it's gonna have way more gain and a more saturated sound. Yep, more gain, even more crunch. It reminds me a little bit more of the sound of the 4558 if it had all the blocking distortion and flaws that this pedal had. it's a little bit cleaner sounding. Like the low end is less farty and I already immediately prefer the sound of it over the 741s, but that's okay. We can switch these out as much as we want. So, how about the capacitors? Well, for that, we're gonna have to disconnect the pedal because we gotta start reworking on it, right? So right there, the 120p, I've gone and ordered some other guys. This is a Kemet Gold NPO, aka COG, 24p. I could not get a 25p. And it is definitely a little bit smaller than that guy. It's got one less footprint over. I'm hoping this doesn't affect the tone hugely because I kind of like the smashy tone I'm getting out of this, and I would like to maybe calibrate this pedal to be able to get both of those sounds. I can use jumpers. So we're gonna have to tear into this buddy here and get in behind to do the rework. You know what I should get? I should see if I can find component sockets so I can start socketing key components like this too. I'm mentally preparing myself for the idea that I might have to build another version of this pedal or scrap this PCB I built altogether. I know it's not P, so that I can, you know, rebuild it with maybe a slightly better layout, even though I can't really find anything wrong with the layout per se, and more featureful. Because right now the layout is calibrated based on these big honking caps that I have. If I use smaller caps, I'll be able to get a more efficient layout. Hopefully, yes, I can pull this out without having to completely dismantle it. All right, I'm going in, wish me luck. Fortunately, that 120p isn't so intricately weaved in there that it's gonna be hard to remove. Fortunately, also, we didn't cut the leads so short that it'll be completely useless again in the future. All right, where's our new guy? Huh, those pads are gone. These PCBs are cheap AF. All right, the rework is complete. The 25p is in place. Just gonna put these guys on finger tight for now and dial in roughly my favorite settings, which was there, and well, I had the gain cranked. Now, one issue this pedal had also was oscillation, but not bad oscillation, just this weird phenomenon where once I connected power to it, even though it wasn't hooked up to a guitar, let's see if it does it this time. Output, yeah. It does it regardless of the output settings, so I wonder if that's what the fourth difference was all about, because the pedal shows a 100 ohm resistor here. That's in the Malmsteen pedal, but it says some people don't put it in this pedal. I might try adding that too. I don't think it'll have an effect on tone, but it might help the stability. Fortunately, once I plug a guitar in and turn the actual circuit on, it's fine. Subtle difference. Subtle, but there is a difference. Now we still have the TL08 blah 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 in there. Let's put the original 741 back in, the smashy sounding op amp, and see how it responds to the 24p. Yeah, I think there might be just a touch more crunch in there. It still sounds smashy. Like it hasn't miracle fixed this pedal by any means. Not that there was anything wrong with it. Let's admit it, if you like the Segborn cranked amp tones, you might like this sound. Indeed, I've really enjoyed playing this pedal as is in certain applications. where I've enjoyed a more vintage sound. All right, so the next big wild card, this guy right here. The stock capacitors in here on both positions, input and output, are 2A102Js. That's a 100 volt, 5% rated polyester film capacitor. And the 102, that's 0.001. So just to eliminate margins of error, I've gone and ordered the identical kind of capacitors. Now these are only 50 volt rated. I don't think I need 100 volt. 50 should be fine for a 9 volt unit that's pushing millivolts, but let's face it. But these are 5% polyester film capacitors. These are Nichinons from Japan. So we gotta replace that 001 right there. Looks like it won't be too hard. Ha. It sucks though. That was a perfectly good amplifier grade capacitor, 400 volt. Okay, this is gonna be a tricky assembly. All right, the surgery is complete. Except I got a value added bonus here. You see, I didn't just order a 102, I ordered a 103. So I have 0.01 and a 0.001 together. And I used another jumper that I scrapped off a motherboard. I pull that and it's only the 001. I put that on there and it connects the 0.01 for a value of 0.011. I doubt you're gonna hear the difference between 0.01 and 0.011. So theoretically, I put that jumper into place and I get the original tone back. But right now, we're gonna disconnect it. And this is gonna be the moment of truth because I'm hoping I'm gonna hear what I wanna hear now with this configuration. Here we go. I think we're on to something. Yeah. That definitely cleaned up a lot of the low end. Let's go jumper them together and see if we get the old sound back, bud. Yeah, holy frick, bud. That's night and day. But then it now maybe goes to the situation where it's a little thin, bud. A little thin, kind of like what we had before with the Malmsteen pedal. Maybe I know how to thicken up the Malmsteen pedal. 01 is too much. 001 is too little. Now, I'm not gonna change out those capacitors now. I might change out dish capacitor or disc capacitor. One problem with this capacitor floating the way it is, quite amusing. Let's step up our game here. Let's put the, which one is it? The UA741 in here. Compare the tone. I definitely can hear the difference between the LM741 and the UA741, and I'm digging the UA741 better. Now, I also wanted to order a 741J. It was a $23 op amp, but I didn't because I have about a dozen op amps in the mail from various different sellers. Some NOS op amps from eBay sellers And we're gonna be comparing in here to see what we can get. So we're gonna put the 8.2 back in for now. See how that sounds. Oh yeah, with the 8.2 it sounds a lot more like the Malmsteen pedal in regards to how much drive I'm getting in that position. It sounds more modern too. Okay, so I'm gonna put the TL072 back in the Malmsteen pedal so we can compare op amp to op amp, even though, you know, there could be various differences. I did find the TL072 and the Malmsteen gave it a more saturated modern distortion tone. Now remember, this guy has a thicker capacitor on the feedback. You know what? Now they sound very similar. Like, there are differences, but they sound very similar now. Oh boy. Oh boy. Good, 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 good whole wheat shreddies. This is coming along nicely. And I'm hoping all you out there in DOD 250 cloning world are learning something, a little bit something something. Because some of you out there, I noticed there's not a lot of YouTube videos about people cloning these things. But here's some information for you. Op amp versus op amp, cap versus cap. Getting some information so that you can improve your clone. TL081, you are a lot more tempting, sir. And this is only the scratch of the iceberg. If you are enjoying this, I highly advise you stay tuned because again, I've got about a dozen different op amps that are pin compatible in the mail as we speak. And as those lots come in, I'm gonna pop them through this pupper and see how they sound, see if we can find a winner. There's a couple knockoffs of the 741, like I think it was a 3140. And then there's the LM108, similar to the LM308 of Rat fame. What happens if we rotify this guy? I don't know. We're gonna find out. Either way, there's one last thing I want to try because I did like fattening up the tone of this a bit with that 0.1 UF capacitor in this position right here, except I find maybe it's a bit too fat. It sounds a bit thick and ugly in my Jubilee with one particular guitar that I usually love to play my Jubilee with. This guy might be more palatable, but there's one more capacitor value I'm gonna change out here. And it's this Dumothy beast. As nice as that flying saucer looks like, flying over top of this circuit board, well, we're gonna try something different. Fortunately, with a 500 volt rating, I do believe it's something like 500 volt, it might be able to make its way into an amplifier at some point. And I made provisions to be able to easily remove this. So this should be an easy swap. So what am I replacing this with? Well, I got a bit experimental here. So seeing here, we have a 473J. That would be the stock modern equivalent. An 047 polyester film 50 volt. But I want to fatten things up a little bit. So here is an 056, bringing us closer to what they got on here and going over. And alternately, I also have an 068. So I'm gonna start with the 056 and see what kind of difference that makes. Just to say. And then we're gonna have all the proper kind of caps in there, really. Low voltage polyester film. Not that I think we're gonna hear a difference between ceramic and polyester film, but it's more about getting that 5-6 in there. And preferably something that doesn't go boom, boom, boom when we tap the pedal. At least with these tones coming together the way they are, it's telling me that my layout isn't complete garbo and that this is a functional pedal with a decent layout. In a future revision, I might integrate that 100 ohm. Actually, that's one tricky part, figuring out where to put that 100 ohm. Have you seen my layout? Have I shown you my layout? The 100 ohm would go between this pad where the wire comes in and here. It'd be tricky because I made this so tight here to fit it in. Actually, this capacitor is physically located here. So I do have room to add the 100 ohm. Well, either way, I don't know if I'm gonna worry about that on camera because I don't think it's gonna have effect on the tone. I'm gonna do that off camera on my own time, but we're gonna try this fatter feedback cap here, and we're gonna see how that sounds now. Does it still oscillate? Yeah. Oh well. All right, fatter feedback cap. TLO81, pick, lost to the void. No, there it is. Yeah, you know what? I feel like it added just a touch of warmth, just enough to take the edge off. That's good. We've made definite progress here today, folks. Now I'm gonna be able to use this and actually enjoy it. And the great part is, at any moment of time, I can just connect that jumper and get the original sound back. Now, one thing I didn't bother doing is hearing what just the op amp sounds like. Well, let's real quick just pop that jumper. It disables the diode clipping, so we hear what just the op amp sounds like. Now you're gonna have a hotter voltage output because the diode clipping, not only do they clip the signal, but they also kind of voltage regulate. They stop you from smashing too much voltage into the front end of the amp. And I know from experience, without those diodes, some amps just aren't having it and they sound But the op amps in of themselves are going to distort the way this circuit's implementing, so. Now, the 081 has more gain than the 741, so even without the diodes, we're still getting some smash and gain. But the only thing you notice it's less harmonic. It's harder to really hit those harmonics. Something about the diode clipping just cleans that up a bit. But the Marshall 800, it's forgiving to a high input signal. You can actually use just a clean boost to drive this guy to where you want it to be. Other amps, not so much. My Jubilee doesn't like clean boost. I know that, and I love using it with overdrive. So that's another interesting option. Diode clipping on or off. And I'm hoping in the future, because I can replace this capacitor with a smaller one, I can maybe throw a different set of diodes in there even. And then have a jumper to select between those two. Even though room might be at a premium right now. Oh, unless I scrap those diodes and do them differently. Either way, stay tuned to find out if I do that. But stay tuned to find out what the other op amps are gonna sound like in future versions of this presentation. The frick was that? All right, we're done here.